Hey everyone, welcome to the Human Cloud Podcast, the spot where leaders come to drive the freelance economy forward. So today we have Rich Wilson, co-founder and CEO of Gigged.AI. Gigged's been around for around 3 years. They've raised over $2 million, and they are a very, very fascinating use case where they're not a traditional marketplace. They're a technology-driven facilitator of tech outcomes. Now, a couple things I want you to listen for. The first, which I'm sorry, I'm going to nerd out, but they buck one of the primary drivers of success. Specifically, their primary driver of success is technology, which is not congruent across freelance. In most cases, the technology for a freelance platform is secondary and is usually sitting in a supportive function, not the reason that clients really use it and embrace it. But that's not the case for Gigged. And when asking Rich, could you have survived without the tech? The answer is absolutely not. Now that brings up the second trend, and that is venture funding. Most platforms don't need venture funding. And in most cases, they bootstrap and they scale the founder and the founding team. That also is not true with Rich. In Rich's words, they wouldn't be able to survive without the 3 years of runway and 2 years of just building the tech. The last thing I want you to listen for is I want you to hear about how he gets into accounts, and for you enterprise leaders, how he gets started. 2 specific Trojan horses. The first being they do enable internal talent marketplaces. And then the second being they enable speed and customization for their specific end user. Now, I know what I said just sounded very geeky, so let's hand it over to Rich. Listen, before we get rolling, let's talk about venture capital. Listen, venture money can be one of the best things that happens to your business. It can also be one of the worst, which is why today's episode is brought to you by Parkway.vc. Listen, when looking at investments, there's 3 things that I and successful founders are always looking for. The first is the people, the second is the portfolio, the third is the partnership. When we talk about the people, both Jesse and Greg have been, in their words, force multipliers for founders because they've done it. They've sold businesses, they've built businesses, they know what it takes. When talking about the portfolio, they have a stance that everything will be simulated, and they operate at the intersection of vision and execution. So they're not going to give you a bunch of fluff. They know how to actually drive a portfolio. And third, when you talk about partnership, what more than money can they give you? Well, if you look at some of their investments and some of their companies, you're going to see really impressive founders, a really impressive portfolio, and also really important co-investors with names like Goldman Sachs, Intel Capital, and Google Ventures. So listen, I want you to go check out Parkway right now at parkway.vc. All right, man. You're probably actually, Rich, you might be episode 114. So you were on as episode 14. When, quick thing, when did you start? When was Gigged started?
July 2021.
2021. Okay, perfect. So listen, this episode, what I think the 2 themes are going to be, what have been the learnings, right? So you start in 2021. It's going to go on a crazy limb and say the assumptions you had in 2021. I'm sure you learned some things and pivoted. And now, so that's going to be the first thing. The second thing, though, is enterprise. And, not to get too geeky, but based off our data, the companies doing the best grew through existing enterprise relationships. And so for you, I don't want to get too deep into the assumptions, but so that's going to be the second sort of angle that I know we're going to talk about. But so let me give it over to you, Rich. Give us a brief on yourself and Gigged.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO and co-founder of Gigged. I come from a staffing background. So I was a recruiter in 2007. I worked with the Leaders Group for 12 years. I helped grow the tech systems business unit, very much contract and SOW staffing. We kind of built that from scratch in Europe, turned that into a huge business. So I very much went from an on-the-phone contract recruiter to leading, a large function, mainly working with enterprise, right? So mainly working with large banks and retail banks. So I was very much used to providing contract and SOW solutions into large enterprise. I then decided, I needed some time out. As anybody that's been a recruiter, especially a leader in a large recruiting firm, it is absolutely difficult. So I took some time out, suffered with some burnout, took some time out to reevaluate my goals. I went to Gartner for 3 years, working with CIOs, and mainly the issues that they were coming with were issues around how do I staff my project quickly? What technology can I use to be able to get the right people? Like, I was a generalist, was meant to be able to talk to CIOs around data transformation, digital transformation, data strategy, but everything all came back to how do I get the right people quickly? And through that time, I was able to get introduced really to freelance platforms. At the time, Gartner were talking a lot about Fiverr mainly, Top Coder and Upwork, and I was able to learn a lot about them because even being in the staffing industry for 12 years, the staffing industry back then really had little appreciation for talent platforms. Like, it wasn't even on our radar. A lot of people think, staffing firms are looking over their shoulder of platforms. Maybe now, but 5 years ago they weren't. They weren't even a thing. Even though the revenue was growing, it wasn't a thing. So anyway, started to really look at that. And another thing that Gartner were pushing a lot at the time was internal mobility. Platforms like Glow, Eightfold, Feel 50, really good platforms. And through that experience, I was kind of like, well, I understand the contingent aspect. So we thought, could we build up what we were going to call a micro work platform for digital transformation, which broke pieces of work into really small gigs? And then could you match a large talent pool to that? Freelancers, contractors, side hustlers, small consultancies. That was the first premise. And also part of the plan, but seemed like a pipe dream, could we also build an internal mobility platform as part of that? So instead of having to use a very tech stack, could a company use our software to be able to say, look, I need a UX designer and I need XYZ done. So I need 45 wireframes done by the 30th of February. And then be able to give them the power to look internally and look externally. Now, that was where we started. We have now been able to get to the stage 2.5 years later where we've been able to now realize that dream and see big companies using that software. But yeah, it's been a big journey. And, like you said, there've been a lot of things we've learned along the way. One of them being really simplifying. And I learned this from Shashank at Venly and Rob from Catalan, who were like, you need to simplify what you do. You need to stop. We were trying to be all things to everybody. And we realized that we are an open talent platform, but really specifically, we are an outcome-based statement of work machine. That's really where the value in working with Gigged.AI from a freelance perspective comes. But also, we can then provide our technology for an internal talent marketplace so companies can tap into their internal tech workforce before they then go externally. And we realized if we just focus on, we have our open talent and internal talent, and we're focused in an enterprise anywhere between 100 million to 5 billion revenue, mainly work with tech consultant firms. We do some work in financial services and energy, but mainly our biggest customers are those large consultant firms. And that's kind of a big learn for us, right? Because when we started, we did really think we were going to be an SMB player. We really thought we were going to be in that working with startups, maybe mid-market, but we've realized that is not our market. And we've realized we could gain much more traction from actually becoming enterprise ready and going after the enterprises. Now there's tricky things to that, procurement, MSPs. It's tricky to engage, but I think if you try and listen and figure out a way to make life as painless for them as possible, there is a way to do it. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey. It feels like 25 years, not 2.5 years, but yeah.
That's what stars do to you, Rich. So let's hit on aspect of these learnings. And so you started in 2021. How important did you think the technology was to this space, or has it been a lot more manual relationship driven? But let's start with that. How important has the tech been?
So we took quite a ballsy decision, and we needed to have very patient investors, to be honest, because of our decision. So we took the decision to double down on building a technology company. We see ourselves as a tech company. So we took the time, to build that initial MVP and then rebuild, learn, iterate, build a new product, learn, iterate. And then once we had that iteration, we then re-platformed both on an enterprise-wide, which cost millions upon millions of pounds, right? So to build the tech stack we've built cost pretty much 80% of all the money we've raised, whether it's grant funding and venture funding. We were really not focused. Our initial investors were great. They were like, experiment, do not rush to revenue, focus and experimenting. And we focused on doing that. And I think that has now led us to a place where we are really starting to accelerate, and we can accelerate really quickly. Now, I made the decision, and again, it was a hard decision at the time. I made the decision that we are going to focus on building the technology which actually automates and integrates, and we are not going to manually fill some open requirements to try and get some vanity revenue, because the last thing I want to do is create a recruitment company which has a bit of tech. I've ran a recruitment company before. I've done it. I don't want to do it again. So we focused massively on building the two platforms and trying to automate, not all of it, right? Because I think you don't want to automate. You still need good people, right? And I've got ex-recruiters as my customer success managers who help whether it's the internal platform or the open platform, there's still a human there, which has been there, done it, that can support you if there's an issue. Because at the end of the day, both platforms, the product is still people. And people are still volatile, right, at both sides. So, but no, we very much focused on that. So for nearly 18 months, all we did was build and iterate the product. And, there was times where you're like, are we doing the right thing here? Because you see a lot of companies, they're posting big revenues, and we're like, nah, let's stick to it. But it was definitely, in my sleepless night, sometimes I'm like, wow, was that the right thing to do? It's paid off. Now it feels like it was the right thing to do. But yeah, there was definitely times where I was like, maybe we should just go out, sign up to an MSP, get as many recs as we can, and just fill them manually. I did think about it. And my board was hugely supportive to say, yeah, but that takes you away from the main thing. Don't lose sight. So yeah, very much a technology play.
Let's get very tactical about the user experience. The reason I bring this up is because, so what I hear you saying is that Gigged, you started as 100% a tech company and what was the original hypothesis, Rich? Was it that you would be a marketplace, but with tech first? What was the original Gigged hypothesis?
Yeah, that was very much a hypothesis that we would be a marketplace, but that we would be a very specific niche marketplace, very much targeting tech teams. But then we would be able to then license the software, so companies could take the marketplace that we have used and then use that internally. One of the things we get asked a lot is a lot of platforms reach out to us saying, can we use your platform? Can we white label it? Now, we do not do that. Not because I have anything against that model, but for us, we are very much a direct to customer. So we work with the end customer. We do not work through intermediaries. It is very much direct with that large bank, direct with that large consultancy firm. So yeah, the hypothesis has pretty much been the same. Obviously, how we message it, how we deliver it, the ICP has changed massively. But the initial hypothesis is kind of scarily similar to what it started out. But as I said, how we do it and the messaging especially has changed a lot.
Gotcha. So let's get tactical. So end user equals enterprise. And what do you use to dictate, by the way? Do you use employee size or spend, or how do you classify enterprise?
We use revenue. So we use revenue. So
Revenue. Okay.
again, lots of places use different ones, but anything over 100 million we're counting as an enterprise. Now some would say that's mid
Okay.
market,
Gotcha.
we use revenue.
Okay. So over 100 million in revenue, and with a focus on the consulting, so the consulting enterprise. Now, who's going in and what are they doing? Is this a VP or director in procurement or talent acquisition that is looking to find a bunch of people? Who is the typical ICP, and what are they doing?
So there's three verticals, as I call it, right? So it's a vertical led approach. So the biggest vertical for us, as you said, tech consulting. After that is financial services, and third is energy firms. So we very much, from an account executive perspective, we target those three verticals. Now, what we do not do is we do not target procurement or talent acquisition. We target the people who are on the hook to deliver the change. So from a tech consulting perspective, we work with mainly revenue leaders and tech leaders. So that could be a CTO, that could be a project delivery consultant, managing director level at some of the big ones. But it's mainly those that are in the hook to deliver digital transformations on the behalf of other clients. Now, procurement and TE sometimes come in. We very rarely get involved with TE. Not because we don't want to, it just doesn't, the way that we tend to be categorized, we're categorized as an SOW supplier. We're not categorized as a talent acquisition spend, which I think has helped us grow quicker because we've been able to work on a procurement via an MSA and not go through an MSP or go through any other third party. On the end client side, so the energy companies and financial services, it's usually the chief information officer, CIO, and the chief data officer, the CDO. Sometimes transformation directors, but mainly tech teams who are delivering digital transformation at pace and have skill gaps everywhere, which is stopping them deliver digital transformations. And we target those people. Those people can usually make decisions, and they're usually open to trying different things. So we're saying, hey, look, we have a platform. We're not a recruitment company. We're not a consultancy company, but you could use our platforms to help. So, for example, and this is where having two platforms becomes really, really nice. So let's say, for example, we're working with a global investment bank. Talked with a CIO for a while, and he's like, look, your open talent approach, I really like, but I am not going to get that over procurement. But I do have full-time hiring freezes on, and I do have some issues. So we've been able to very quickly implement an internal talent marketplace to them. Now, in time, they will probably use the open talent marketplace, but because we've been able to lead with a very specific technology solution, it gets us in the door and it gets us as a partner. And that's been huge for us in terms of, and that kind of, I learned a lot of that from Gartner in terms of how to talk that way. For example, a lot of the technology consulting firms that we work with, they're delivering Gen AI projects, they're doing digital transformation projects and programs. Their permanent bench is reduced. Hiring a contractor, especially in the UK, is becoming something that a lot of these firms don't do because of IR35. But if you hire on an outcome basis and only pay on a milestone, the chances of it being inside IR35 are hugely slim. The chances are really, really slim. So it gives them a compliant way to be able to hire. So So it's really very specifically into those tech people that are on the hook to deliver, and they're willing to look at different ways, because traditionally most of the people have been dealing with contract recruiters, and they maybe do have a big platform like a Workday or something in, which is fine. But if you're trying to deliver change quickly, a lot of these systems do not help you, right? So we're able to offer them a solution to quickly get the people they need, either via an outcome-based SOW or tapping into their already existing permanent and contract workforce.
Gotcha. So if I hear you correctly, because I think this is a very key point. So the ideal leader needs quick and lean solutions, which the current alternatives they just don't have, right? And it's kind of a matter of time, right? Because external talent has been around forever, right? Digital transformation related to external talent, meaning the Workdays, the VMSs, the MSPs, those also now are on their legacy phase. So what you're saying is, listen, the supply of talent, meaning find me the people, and this is where I'm going to take a little bit of a bridge, Rich. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the supplying of people, the finding, that is important. But for your leaders, and your leaders meaning the people that are on the hook for tech transformation and tech projects, they need speed, and they need something that they can hack around and be experimental with, rather than going with another staffing agency or working within their traditional VMSs. Is that an accurate representation?
Yeah, totally,
Okay.
totally. So if you think about traditionally how it's been, if you're a firm that hires a lot of contingent workers, especially this is really special in the UK, you normally would have an MSP or an RPO, and then you would have a VMS in place. Now, the reality is that slows innovation, right? So it slows innovation massively. Like if you, I've not met a platform who has said, yeah, you know what, VMSs has just, transformed my business. They're there for a reason, and they're there to categorize spend. But again, if you're delivering and your job is on the hook to deliver a project for a CEO who has said, hey, look, I need a Gen AI project stood up by the end of March, and your job is on the hook for that, you're going to look for different ways to staff that project. You're not going to go through the MSP. And that's been going on forever, right?
Yep.
So I think the beauty of what we're doing is what we're leaning into is it's not new. Rogue spend is not new. CapEx and OpEx spend moves is not new, but being able to solve it with an actual platform and a transparent platform that can be used by hiring managers compliantly quickly is new. So we're leaning into the old ways of procurement and doing things, but bringing a modern twist on. All right, how do you do it? Like a good example is we work with a kind of $10 billion consulting firm. They get data projects every day from their customers. They have a very small permanent bench of data scientists. Now, they've been one of our very early customers. So traditionally, they would go to their contract PSL, preferred supplier list, and they would go out, and that was 10 recruitment agencies. They would need to speak to all 10, tell them what they needed. They would then get 10 to 15 CVs back. So that's nearly 150 CVs for somebody that they need to hire within 24 hours. By the time they go back through everybody to interview, to hire, that person's gone. Now, it's 2024. People are still hiring that way. That's crazy. So by setting them up in the platform and by signing an MSA with procurement, they've already ticked the box. And then they can post a project, an outcome-based project, and then they can hire someone all within a couple of hours. So they can then generate revenue on that talent nearly straight away. And they're paying on the outcome being done, not time and material. So again, it's a really it's a way that again it's compliant. They can still raise a purchase order. They can still do all the things they would normally do with a staffing firm, but you can get economies of scale by doing it through a platform. Because I don't need to have, I have 14 employees. And I know Sam Altman was saying how you can build a company with one employee. We're not there yet, but we've got 14. That's not a lot of people because we use Gen AI to convert those projects into outcome-based statement of works. We have done that for a long time. And by doing that, we're cutting out the need for recruitment consultants to do a lot of the, as I said, we still hire great recruiters and we develop them into customer success managers. So I'm not saying recruiter jobs are not there, but we're able to massively cut out the friction points because the manager can go on, create their gig, get instant matches, and start to make those hires straight away. That reduces the time to hire by weeks. And if that hiring manager is a bit more forward thinking, they could do that. They could do that hire in a couple of hours.
Right. So let me ask a clarifying question related to the supply of the talent. So and also let me kind of summarize a little bit. So one of the big things you mentioned was I'm going to call it the hook / the Trojan horse of getting in. So instead of saying, hey, come post a job for 15 million freelancers, you're saying get started with an internal marketplace because like you rightfully called out, it might be a 6+ month MSA process just to get the MSA signed, and you're going to get into a legal / procurement discussion about indemnification and a bunch of things that are really ancillary to the work. So let me just make sure, let me confirm that you've noticed a great strategy for leaders to get started is by saying, hey, let's start you with an internal marketplace. Did I hear that correct?
That's one of the routes, right? So that is not the only route. As I said, there are times where they'll go straight to the open talent platform and they won't need an internal function. But yeah, we have definitely found that we can get to the bigger companies and to the higher decision makers by able to talk to them about internal mobility and open talent instead of just having the conversation like, hey, we can get you freelancers. The days of that being able to be a message that people want to tap into are gone, right? So it's like, we've been able to broaden the conversation around, hey, we can get a freelancer to your gig, to, hey, we can help you find the right people by tapping into your already existing workforce that you pay. And if you do not have anyone internally, because on average, there's only an internal match 30% of the time, right? So the other 70% of the time, guess what? And that's the downside to companies, a lot of the big internal talent marketplaces. They have not tapped into open talent and freelance talent. They're about to, but they haven't yet. And that's where our competitive advantage really starts to come in, because we've already built a verified, curated network of over 20,000 data scientists, data analysts, UX designers, but we also have the internal talent technology, which then makes it a bit of a no-brainer for a company to engage with us. And then it speeds up that procurement process because, you're right, going back and forth on indemnity and compliance, and it's a long process, right? But if you could find the urgency to go, well, look, we can solve a problem right now, we can save you money or generate you revenue right now, then the process of getting you onboarded is going to be a lot quicker.
Let me call out that last thing you said, and then there's two things as well. So the first is, you mentioning we can generate your revenue. That's one of the biggest traps that we see with freelance is that typically leaders, there's no. So let me not to get too down a rabbit hole, but so there's no clear owner in our space. There's not a chief freelance officer. It's usually someone who has taken freelance and taken ownership of it themselves and I basically call them, they're little entrepreneurs of businesses unto themselves usually, even though they're sitting within a large enterprise. But the trap is, unless you have a revenue generating hook, things just get lost. And so how do you really motivate someone Well, cost is good, and most times though it can just be cute, not actually impactful. Likewise, speed can sometimes be that same thing of wow, you can get someone in the building in 2 to 5 days compared to 6 plus months. That's awesome. But revenue is typically the hook of if you can find a way to show that will drive you revenue, that really gets in the door. But now I want to ask a clarifying question. So let's talk about the supply side. So you mentioned 20,000 vetted data related freelancers. Is that what the supply looks like?
Not just data. Data is definitely the most in demand for us. So the top four, out of the top five skills, four are data related, right? Data scientist, data analysis, and Python development. But we do everything from product, cybersecurity, software development, very much what I like to say doers. So you won't see many project managers or product managers in our platform. It will mainly be your developers, analysts, people who are actually can do a deliverable. Because if you can't do a deliverable, it's very hard to put a deliverable on a project manager, for example. You could do it, but it's quite clunky.
Yeah. So, and now how out of the various value propositions that you have, right? So the tech being one, the talent being another. How important is finding the actual freelancer compared to the whole experience?
It's super important. What we've tried to do is try and make that again as seamless as possible. We've very little disputes and very little projects that don't get completed on our platform. Now, big reason for that is we spend so much time on making sure that what we call something like, we have a phrase internally, death to spam gigs, right? So what we don't want is either fake or badly qualified gigs on our platform. So if you can have a very, very clear deliverable and a very clear project, guess what? The best freelancers are going to find that and they're going to try and get it, because if they can get defined work at a good rate of pay, especially on an outcome basis, then people are going to want to do that work. So, and because of the way we've built the system, you get instant matches, right? We've built that from day one. So you get instant matches based on the skill, based on the work they've done before, and that works really, really well. So it's a key component of what we do, for sure. But it's not the bit where we find the friction point, right? I think we find the friction point in making sure it can be qualified and make sure the work can be defined, and it's not around the talent. Now, what I've got to say is, I said that we spent a lot of time building technology. The other decision that we made from the beginning, which was a difficult one as well, was that we focused for the first kind of 24 months in just building supply. Now, on the internal talent marketplace, you don't need us to build supply because we're tapping into their supply. But for our open talent, we had to build supply. So we, from day one, we hired a community manager when we had no community. Harvey, that you've spoke to before, still with us. And we focused on getting out to events, talking to LinkedIn and trying to build as many good people in the skill sets that we knew we were going to need as possible, and trying to, build them into a community where they could get advice from other people, they could network, because we knew we weren't going to be able to give them work in the first 12 to 24 months. And even now, I wouldn't say we're still not there where we could keep everybody, all those 20,000 working. We probably never will get there, right? That's obviously one of the challenges, but being able to get there is definitely key for us. And yeah, we've just spent a real focus on that. And now, because we've seen, now that we can share, hey, we've got a data scientist, it's a £50,000 gig, it's XYZ client, it's clearly defined, then guess what? We then get a lot of great data scientists coming and wanting to sign up to the platform. So we're now at the stage where we're now building that supply through the demand. But initially we just built supply onto the platform. And again, another risky decision, because that doesn't generate revenue, but it allowed us to build a nice, strong foundation.
Now, let me ask you a question related to that. And you're doing something that I would say is, and this is going to be a funding question. You're doing something that is not necessarily correlated to what we've seen from the way most marketplaces slash platforms grow. And I want to make sure that I call out that Gigged is different than most niche freelance talent platforms that we see, with the core difference being that most niche freelance platforms are an extension of the founder, meaning most of them are replicating the job that they had in a freelance platform. And what is very aligned to yours is that the way you put it, the key friction point being qualification for them, most niche freelance platforms, what they do best is they help the end client actually scope the work and they help them understand what they should be hiring for. Now, on yours, the tech has been crucial, whereas in most, the tech is secondary, right? It's a support function. The clients never see it, but for yours, it's central. So the question I'm going to ask you is, could you have done this without bootstrapping? Or is this a play that needed to have large venture backing in order to give you the 12 plus months of revenue being immaterial, but still having your war chest? So, I'll leave it open with that. Could you have done this bootstrapped?
I don't think so. It's a question I ask myself a lot. I don't think so. And the reason I say that, we've been very, very fortunate. We were backed. Our first ever funder was grant funding from Innovate UK. Innovate UK have never ever backed a talent platform, a marketplace, or any sort of HR tech. Now, they're the UK's government's innovation hub. They gave us the grant funding to build the initial algorithms right from the get-go. We've also been supported by Scottish Enterprise. We're a proud Scottish company. We obviously work globally, but we still call ourselves a Glasgow headquartered company. And Scottish Enterprise have supported us a lot. And we were supported by Techstart Ventures and Par Equity and a lot of kind of high profile angels. And they really bought into what we were trying to do. What I would say is, I'm proud of what we've done. We've been able to do it with a spend of around, we've raised about 3 million and we've spent about 2 million so far. So when you think about it, I'm proud of what we've built and what we've done. And even though in Scotland that's seen as a lot of money, compared to other platforms that have raised money, it's not a lot of money. So I am proud of how far we've came. But no, I don't think we could have bootstrapped the way that we tried to do it. As I said, I did think about it, but if we had bootstrapped, we would have became a recruitment company with a fancy front end. And we were absolutely key that I do not want to be a recruitment company. I want to be a technology company that helps solve the people issue, but I do not. And I have been lucky that the people around me have supported that vision from day one. Now, we're now in a phase of hyper growth. We're now growing quicker than we probably would have imagined. And we've got to keep that going, right? So the investors, they were very much like, yeah, build, but the rubber's got to, hit the road. 2024 for us is the year that the rubber hits the road. I'm lucky the first 5 weeks of the year, we've done more revenue than we have the whole of last year. And we had a good year last year. So we're now growing. And yeah, so in short, without the venture and grant funding, we could not have done what we've done. But that was our decision, Matt. Like from day one, we always had a plan. Myself and Craig, my co-founder, he'd been a freelancer for 15 years. We knew what we were trying to build and we had a plan, and we said, we're going to build this company and we're going to spend the first 2 years building product. And then we're going to focus in the last 3 years, because hopefully, our plan is, 5 year and then an exit, right? Not off into the sunset exit, hopefully be part of a larger company, whether that be a staffing firm or a consultancy firm, maybe another platform, but probably not. I kind of see that's where we'll end up. And so we always had that 5 year plan. and we started with that in mind. So yeah, we were able to do it that way. But and there's been times when we're like, are we doing the right thing, right? There's times, think about the VC market over the last few years. Everybody's talking about profitability, revenue, and I was like, nope, no revenue. We're going to focus on building the product. And times, and again, there's times when you're like, am I crazy? um, but yeah, now we're focused on building that building that traction.
And I would say, Rich, in terms of the question of are you crazy, I actually would say that yes, you're definitely crazy. It takes a certain it takes a certain size of nuts. I know that's probably not the PC way to say it, but it takes a certain size of nuts to be able to withstand 1 to 2 years of foregoing what we're going to call non-strategic revenue. But with that said, the reason I don't think you're totally crazy is because you didn't say we're going to be the everything platform. Now, if you had come and said, hey, we are going to revolutionize the freelance economy by having a technology-led freelance marketplace, I'd say, yeah, you're crazy. It's not going to work. But the reality is you did have one, you had years of experience, right? So you were not coming in as like a fresh college grad or someone not in the industry. Like you did have experience. The second, though, being you are very, very niche in terms of the way you think about technical talent. And so if you had said we're everything and we're every skill, I would say, nope, not giving you any money, running for the hills. But the fact that you knew, okay, the beachhead from a skills / a project perspective is tech talent. And things you'd mentioned too, like let's get these wireframes done, let's get the V1 of the site done. That's still niche enough that I think it gave your craziness a little bit of insight, right? So I'd say you're insightfully crazy, or crazy with an insight rather than just crazy is the way I would put it.
Yeah, we've done a really cool in November. We've done a really cool campaign to try and prove, the power of open talent as well as what's going on within, Gen AI talent. And we work with OpenAI, and we've done a campaign to work with companies in the UK, and we funded 5 projects with OpenAI. So we would provide the data scientist or the API engineer, and they would provide the credits and the expertise. And we worked together on specific outcomes to deliver proof of concepts projects. Some of them big companies, some of them smaller. But through that kind of partnership and being niche enough to say, hey, we can find an awesome data scientist within a couple of hours. And OpenAI were saying, hey, cool, we'll give the credits for them to do what they're trying to do so they can then prove. And that's where we kind of see it. That's kind of what we're seeing is that digital transformation. I know it's not people, it's kind of out of date term, but there's not a better term. Digital transformation incorporates generative AI, machine learning, everything, right? So that's only going to go one way. There's only going to be more. Going back to revenue, there's a reason that companies are investing in this because they think it can either create more revenue or cut costs. And our view is like, right, well, let's use the great talent that people have either at their fingertips internally or open talent to actually do those projects, and being able to say no to stuff and being able to, because we've been asked, like, people have asked me, hey, Scotland is now becoming one of the space capital outside North America. Oh, why don't you become a space marketplace? Well, we could, right? We're not going to. Scotland also has a huge renewable energy focus right now. We could become a renewable energy marketplace, but we're not going to. We're going to focus on helping people who are delivering tech change quickly, and we're going to help them tap into the right people. And that has really, that was something last year that just became so critical in a very crowded market. There's more and more platforms happening all the time, and just and I've got to give a lot of credit to yourself and John Younger, who've through the writings and through the support that you guys have given a lot of us early stage platforms, has been able to allow me to think that way and go, let's not try and be everything. My initial plan was, could I create a total talent management solution for tech leaders? And John said to me, you're out your mind. And I'm glad he did, because that allowed me to really go, what? Let's focus. Part of the reason I'm wearing a Yankees hat today, because I usually wear a hat of somewhere else, and John's always say you need to wear a Yankee hat. So this is for John Younger. But yeah, that was a big part of us, is being able to focus. And like I said, we have not pivoted our technology in the last 2.5 years, but we have massively pivoted our messaging and our ICP. Like we've really been through a huge journey on that. I always wanted to go to enterprise, but I thought a startup like us, no enterprise is going to buy us. But we were wrong on that. And then when we doubled down on it, we could then go. And that's when my co-founder needs to get a lot of credit, because he built the platforms with data privacy, with AI ethics, with all of those things in mind. So when we come to get onboarded, we're not getting shot down. We're actually getting onboarded pretty simply because we've thought about all of these things.
And that's where, when I say, you're crazy, but you're crazy with an insight, it's also that you understood things like that. We are always amazed by, I don't want to say younger, but by lack of enterprise experienced founders and executive teams, when they don't understand just how comprehensive and painful the enterprise is. And I kind of liken it to, the enterprise it literally is a mountain. It is not sexy in any way, but, I'll never forget at Microsoft early on, someone explained it like the machine. They were like, machines are hard to get up and running. They're very complicated and comprehensive. But when you do get a machine to work, you have the steam engine, right? And you have a level of scale and growth that nothing else can. Now, the growth, by the way, the growth might not be the Uber rocket ship, but that growth is generally scalable and sustainable, and it looks like a Salesforce, right? So listen, Rich, we're coming up on time. I want to make sure, most important, where can our listeners find you? And then I also want to give you, 1 to 2 minutes to just get on your soapbox, and you can talk about, very quickly the power of AI. You can very quickly talk about where you hope the industry goes to. But yeah, most important, where can our listeners find you? And then stage is on to you, Rich.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn addict, so just Rich Wilson at LinkedIn. You can check out the Gigged.AI website. Should be reskinned by the time this goes out, so just www.gigged.ai. In terms of my soapbox, I think we are into a really interesting realm. There is a lot of scaremongering that AI will replace even freelance talent. It will replace normal talent. I think the reality is it'll augment a lot of things. There will be certain roles that will disappear. But we're seeing new roles created all the time. We're seeing gigs right now for an OpenAI API developer. Well, that wasn't a job 12 months ago. Now it is. Now it's one of the top requirements we see. Things are going to change. So I don't think we're going to see the end of people doing work, but we will see it to start working alongside autonomous AI agents, whether that be UX design, whether that be website design, whether that be creating data lakes, whatever that be. There's going to be a combination. In terms of the industry, what I'm kind of keen to see, and I mean staffing firms, and I mean HR tech and platforms. The thing that I have tried to do, and I've not been able to do it yet, and I've not seen anybody do it successfully yet, is how do we actually collaborate properly between different technologies to actually help the user experience. MSPs and VMSs are hated by everyone who uses them. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with an MSP or VMS, but they're not built for a good user experience, whether talent or whether you're a hiring manager. And how can we, one of the things I've thought about, could we work with one of the large staffing firms, an Adecco, an AMS, a Randstad, an Allegis? Could we use our technology to tap into their economies of scale? They've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of contingent talent. They've got tens of thousands of enterprise customers. How do we tap into that? Instead of just saying, we're here to disrupt. I don't think that's the way we do. I think there's a way forward. I don't know what it is yet, but I think there will be. Upwork have done some decent work within the VMS MSP route recently. A few big announcements. I think we're yet to see the proof in the pudding about how can talent platforms and the other technology ecosystem actually work together to actually help people find the jobs they want when they want, and help those hiring managers get the talent they need when they want. So I'm going to keep trying to campaign on that, but that for me is the next big thing, right? I don't think AI is going to get rid of everybody's jobs. I don't think AI is going to kill every staffing firm, and I don't think it's going to kill talent platforms. I think there is a way for us to actually collaborate to help solve those customer problems that we haven't yet found.
I love it. Rich, that was perfect. That was perfect. For all of you, go find Rich on LinkedIn ASAP. And Rich, thank you so much for hopping on.
Pleasure. Thank you, Matt.